Hello everybody, Jake your resident content cowboy here. Yeehaw, it's Monday. On Mondays we do tier lists, and on Wednesdays we wear blank.
Wow, your house is really nice.
I know, right?
Today we are going to be talking about Season 15 of Pokemon Unite. We had a massive balance patch, a new Pokemon released, and a lot of things have changed. Let's take a look at our tiers right here. We have our God tier. We're only going to put one Pokemon in our God tier. We're not friggin' Norse around here. We have our S tier, the stay together for the kids tier. We have our A+ tier, the Anthem tier. I don't know if you know what this is about, but this tier list is just referencing something. We have our A tier, the all the small things tier. We have our A-, the Adam songs tier. We have our B tier. It could have been called the Blink. Still got the B tier. Hate that. We have our C tier, the carousel tier. We have our D tier, the damn it memorial tier. And then we have an odd tier, which is the what's my tier again tier, where I don't know where to put these Pokemon exactly, so I'm putting them down into this tier. Let's talk about it. So many things have changed from our last patch. We had this Pokemon right here, Mewtwo Y, sitting up in our God tier, kind of with Blissey hanging out there being an absolute menace, right? But right now, that is not the case inside of Pokemon Unite. So I wanted to start off by saying that I still think Mewtwo Y is insane, but I don't think it is Mewtwo Y. In fact, it's one of the lower S tier choices inside the game right now. I think it might be A+ tier currently. And here's the other thing that we have to recognize. By picking Mewtwo Y, you cannot pick Mewtwo X. Mewtwo X now, I think, has more value than Mewtwo Y. I'm going to put these both up here. There's no question that Mewtwo X and Y are some of the best Pokemon in the game, but the nerfs to Mewtwo Y have been considerable. So I had to start off our tier list talking about this. Honestly, if I had to rank these two, I would rank them more like this, and I might keep them like this. I think X has more value than Y currently, even though Y is still a good Pokemon. Both of them have insane Unite moves. Megaing is nuts. I don't feel as worried about facing Y anymore than I do X. I feel like they really hurt Y, and they needed to because it was completely busted. So let's continue to move on with the rest of our tier list here. Now that we've talked about the Mewtwo's, let's start talking about the rest of the attackers. We just talked about Mewtwo Y. The attackers are quite varied. We have the most attackers inside the game as a role, and that's because they kind of have a wide variety of sort of styles that they come in. We have sort of your auto attackers. I'm just going to start lining these up right here, and then we can move them around. We've got our auto attackers. We've kind of got our mage-like Pokemon right here. We've got weirdos. Cram sort of sits in mages, and Teleon sort of sits in auto attackers. Mew is a mage. Venusaur is kind of a weird hybrid. Glaceon's kind of a mage. Chandelure's kind of a mage. Delphox definitely a mage. Who else do we got on here? Come on, buddy. Decidueye, Greninja, Dragapult sort of hanging out in this area. There we go. A lot of our attackers now added to our tier list right here. So let's start to take a look at exactly where they go, what Pokemon are sort of the best inside this role. And it's interesting because you are sort of comparing them against each other, but they all sort of fill slightly different functions inside of a match. Let's start here with our mages. Our mages are performing a little better, I think, than our auto attackers right now, mainly because of the item Slick Spoon. It's been a pretty amazing item for a while. It's funny because I don't know if you remember, but before Slick Spoon was around, we did not talk too highly of some of the special attackers inside of Pokemon Unite. They just didn't do enough. Curse Instance has also helped a lot of these Pokemon. Pikachu, I think, is doing very well. Can hang out up in our A tier. Another A tier Pokemon, I would say, is Chandelure, doing very, very well inside the game. Alolan Ninetales, I think, still probably hanging out here in the A tier, even though it was nerfed a little bit. Mew is either in our A+ or our S tier. The funny thing about Mew is Mew really didn't get that big of a buff in the recent balance patch. I think people just remembered how broken Mew was, and then you buff it a little bit and you're like, oh, okay, Mew's actually pretty insane. It's either in our A+ or our S tier right here. An extremely strong Pokemon. I think our A- tier, Espeon, Gardevoir, Delphox is questionable. It can go either one. I would say Cram probably hangs out in our A tier a little bit, specifically Dive Cramorant. They finally fixed it, and that build is actually a lot better than I think people give it credit for. Glaceon hanging out here in the A- tier I think seems about fair, and then Venusaur is either in our A or A+ tier. If I had to move a Pokemon up, I might move Delphox up one. It's just so self-sufficient. These are all really good Pokemon, by the way. I mean, we're trying to move them between A+ and A- tier. Like, these are all really, really solid choices. And then at times, Venusaur is A+, especially in competitive play. Outside of competitive play, I do think it kind of hangs out in A. And then in here, all of these are good in different ways, but I think an A tier for all these Pokemon is just about right. They don't do anything that makes me say they're so broken that they have to be picked. Pika's doing really good right now too, but I think that's a fair place for all these Pokemon. And now let's talk about our auto attackers. Our auto attackers were overshadowed by Mewtwo Y for a long time, except for one. And a few of these have gotten some buffs over the past few months, and let's see kind of where everything shakes out. If I had to put... Well, the highest is easy. That's Inteleon. Inteleon is one of the best Pokemon in the game. Anything in our S tier is eligible for our God tier, and Inteleon is definitely in the conversation right there. After the most recent balance patch, you could have seen some nerfs to this Pokemon, but you did not, and for that reason, Inteleon stays as one of the best Pokemon inside the entire game. It's not really in the same group as these Pokemon, especially because it's special attack, so the Slick Spoon is also helping it out a ton right there. I wonder if they cut the Slick Spoon down, like if they nerfed it and they like cut it in half, I wonder what would happen to the meta. It would be pretty interesting, I would say. Let's take a look at the rest of our auto attackers right here. Out of this list, the best ones are Decidueye and Duraludon. So Duraludon is a Pokemon that doesn't get a lot of love, but just consistently performs well. Really doesn't have any down months on win rate, and it's just because its auto attacks are so incredibly powerful, and its secure is very, very good. Its Unite move is very impactful, and anything that can rip and secure objectives that well always has some value inside the game. And then you have Decidueye, who not only got a buff to its Unite move, but also Razor Leaf. So any way you play Decidueye is better right now. Then we have Cinderace, Greninja, Dragapult. All of these Pokemon are decent. I think the best of them is probably Cinderace right now, so I could put it in the A- tier. I think it would probably look something like this: Cinderace, Dragapult, Greninja, or Cinderace, Greninja, Dragapult. All of these Pokemon are different shades of good, because they're all carries, but at times underwhelming. In general, I think out of all of these, I would like to see Greninja and Dragapult buffed. I could see the tier list looking a little more like this. Possibly, if you wanted to delineate it even more, we could have Decidueye in our A tier, just because I think Spirit Shackle is so incredibly powerful. Duraludon in our A-, Cinderace in our B, and Greninja and Dragapult in C. Now, it doesn't mean that these Pokemon need a lot to start getting really good, and it also doesn't mean they can't carry super hard. These are strong carry Pokemon, but you know, you look at something like Greninja, Cinderace, they just need so much experience to get online, as opposed to a lot of these Pokemon like Inteleon that has Water Gun secure at level 1 and has like a sure hit half your life move at level 7. Like, I don't know. They're just in an unfortunate position, it feels like. They're not bad, and they are carries, but compared to a lot of the other carries, I don't think they're doing an amazing job. We have talked about Mewtwo X, so let's keep going with someone. You know what? Let's save our all-rounders, actually, because that's the most recent release, so we'll save that for last. Let's move on to... Let's talk Defenders. Let's talk Defenders. I mean, Defenders are insanely good inside of Pokemon Unite. I'm going to start moving them up onto our tier list right here. Then we're going to start talking about all of our defenders and kind of moving them around where exactly we think they are. I think the defenders are amazing. Inside this conversation, I am also going to talk about Wigglytuff, even though it is not a defender. It essentially kind of fills that role of a tank. And for some reason on this tier list, it is green. And I don't know why, because it is a supporter. Clefable's the same way on this tier list. Not sure why. Okay. All the defenders are pretty dang good. There really isn't any defender that's terrible, and having a defender on your team is a massive advantage compared to a team that does not have one. The ability to displace your enemies, protect your carry Pokemon, CCs, the stuns and things like that inside of Pokemon Unit are massive, and some of these defenders also do a great job of healing themselves. So let's start placing some of these things. Where do we want to start? Let's start with Crustle, who I think is an A+ defender right now. Now, I'm not comparing Crustle to Pikachu necessarily on this tier list. They fill a different role, which is why I kind of started with all attackers right here, right? So Crustle, I think, is one of the best defenders inside the game after the recent buffs. It's really good at moving enemies around, and its Unite move is basically a you can't do anything for a little while Unite move. It's just so strong. Its Unite is so game-changing in some of those late fights, and not only is it able to really displace your opponents with X-Scissor, but at the same time, it can KO them as well, and it's this thing that you can't even hit because it has retaliate damage. I think Crustle's doing really well. I think A+. I might move it lower, but I think A+. And then we have to talk about some S-tier defenders. We'll start with Lapras. Even after nerfs, I think the worst this Pokemon is A+. I don't know. I've been messing around with it a little bit. I've seen it inside games. It does not feel like it is a bottom tier defender at all. Even after nerfs, I think Lapras is still one of the best in the game. And a defender who's going nowhere, in my opinion, is Slowbro. They're not touching Slowbro. It's so good. When Lapras gets nerfed and Umbreon gets nerfed, it just gains more value. I think Slowbro is incredible. And if I had to pick one of these Pokemon to maybe be an A+ of the three I just talked about, it might be Umbreon. Umbreon and Lapras could easily switch here. However, both are still incredibly good. I think Umbreon, at least from my experience inside of matches, I've felt less impact from the Umbreons than I have the Laprases lately. Even after the nerfs, I still feel like the Laprases seem to be more impactful. They can just they seem to last longer and dish out more damage in some important moments. That being said, Umbreon still one of the best in the game, up in the A+ tier for sure. Some really solid defenders. I would still put Trevenant in our A+ tier. I think it's one of the best defenders inside the game. Incredibly good, able to recover its own HP, great stuns, really strong at supporting the team because of its stuns and the ability to push people around. Goodra is crushing it right now. I think A tier is very fair for Goodra. It still doesn't have the amount of crowd control or, stuns, knock-up slows that I would want out of a defender. Sometimes it feels a little light on that compared to something like, Umbreon, Surf from Slowbro, Woodhammer, X-Scissor, things like that. It's not bad by any means. I think it's really, really good, but it kind of hangs out more in our A tier right here with something like Blastoise. Blastoise is a weird one because Blastoise works as a defender and as kind of a brawly sort of almost carry all-rounder feeling sort of defender. In that sense, I think the greatest thing about Blastoise is it has two good builds. You could play it as the Hydro Pump Surf, or you could play it Rapid Spin Water Spout, and both provide tons of value for the team. A solid defender. I don't think it's moving anywhere out of our A tier. Snorlax. Snorlax is doing pretty well right now, especially with some of the buffs it's got. I still don't know, outside of competitive, if it's going to be top tier, but I think A- is a fair place to put this Pokemon right now. It might be even better than A- currently. Its Unite move change was really, really nice for it. I still do think these other defenders feel like they provide a little more value, especially, again, outside of 5 versus 5 competitive drafting play. You could definitely get more value out of Snorlax right there. The tier lists I make are for 99% of the players, not for, just like only competitive. I think only competitive, even in blind pick where you're just kind of, going on the ladder, I don't think you'd pick Snorlax that much. Mamoswine is another one that I think is good as a defender, but probably could use a little love to compete with some of these defenders that have, the ability to heal themselves like crazy. It's good, not great. And if I needed to, I could put it down in the B tier, and Wigglytuff would probably hang out right there in the B tier. It's a solid tank. It does some pretty good stuff. It has more value the less Umbreon you see, and less value the more Umbreon you see. I still think Wiggly and Mammo could probably use a little love to make them compete with the other defenders. And then I have Greedent, where I don't really know where to put Greedent. It's a role of its own, and it's like it's doing its own thing. It's not what you expect as a defender for your team. It is a harasser tank, and it's doing its own thing. And I don't even really know where to rank it for that reason, because in its job, there's only one other Pokemon who does its job, and that's Sableye, kind of. And they're both good at their job. They're just a weird job. So I don't even know what to say about these Pokemon, because they don't fit super well inside of most team compositions. So that's, I guess, what I'd say about both of these. And while we're talking about supporters, let's start talking about supporters. I'm going to start putting them out here onto our tier list. We've got Comfey, we've got Eldegoss, Blissey, Mr. Mime, Clefable. Anybody else? One more time? No. Okay. Supporters are busted. They're so incredibly good. I do love, right, in Pokemon Unite, it can be frustrating, but I do love that supporters and defenders are so good, because otherwise, you know, you already get teams of like 5 attackers. So I think it's good that these roles are so strong, but gosh, they are brutally strong. Blissey just got nerfed. I bet it's still S tier, but for the time being, I'm just going to set it here in the A+ tier, and I think another supporter is going to have to take that S tier, and that's going to be Comfey. One of these two Pokemon are kind of the most supportive of the broken carry inside the game. It's either Blissey or it's Comfey. Blissey's Unite move on top of Safeguard, Bliss Assistance, Soft Boil, any of it really. And then Comfey's just ability to grant shields, its Unite move. Both of these Pokemon are essentially enablers of the worst things that we have inside of Pokemon Unite. And for that reason, they're gonna be top tier for a long time. I'm guessing Comfey beats out Blissey right now, especially if Mewtwo Y does hang out kind of closer to the A+ tier. That being said, both of these Pokemon still incredibly good. Eldegoss, a little different, but incredibly strong. Hoopa, I would also put up into this tier right here. Guys, supporters are so good. The ability to give your teams recover is just incredible. Eldegoss's shields, the auto attacks from Eldegoss and Hoopa are brutal. These Pokemon are so good, and I think a team is really not complete without a good supporter on it right now, and they're just so strong. Even with curse items and things like that, like, these Pokemon are still so incredibly valuable. Mr. Mime is a weird one. I'm probably going to keep Mr. Mime down here in the C tier. It's either C or B. It's not terrible, but boy, how the mighty have fallen. I mean, Mr. Mime just really doesn't do the job that it used to. Still, a great Mime is really impactful. It's closer to a Wigglytuff than it is, you know, an Eldegoss or something like that. But you could say both Mime and Wiggly could use a little love. I could see both of them kind of hanging out here in our C tier. Not bad, and not having a tank or something like that on the team, they do a good job of it. But boy, there are so many options in the game that just outclass them. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Clefable, on the other hand, I think can probably be up here in our A+ tier. It's really just pick your poison. What kind of support do you want on the team, and how are you going to support the team with it? All of these recovery supports are insanely good. I don't really know how you can separate them too much, except for saying maybe if you had to, you could say Comfey, Blissey a little bit better than the others, but it's really close. It's really close. And I think Clefable actually is a little underrated when it comes to a lot of the supports inside the game. Its healing is insane. Its Unite move recovery is incredible. It's the fact that it heals the whole team too is just so nuts. Gravity and Follow Me are both busted. I don't know. All the supports are kind of broken in the game right now. They're just so dang good. Oh my gosh! I did miss an attacker. I couldn't see the red. We missed Sylveon. Ah, Sylvie. I think Sylveon's probably an A- inside the game. Sorry I missed you, Sylvie. It was an easy one to miss. There's so many friggin' Eevees inside this game right now. But I missed little Sylveon. I just saw it out of the corner of my eye right there. I think Sylveon's in a solid place. Some people think it deserves some buffs. The only buff I would want to see for Sylveon is a Unite move buff, but even then, I think Sylveon's actually doing a lot better than people think. It's one of those Pokemon that I think people are... it's easy to forget how valuable it is. However, it also does feel like it fits in a weird spot inside of most teams. And that, I think, is maybe the most difficult thing about a Pokemon like that. All right, moving on to our speedsters right here. Let's get them up there. Leafeon, Absol, Talon, Dodrio, Gengar, Zoroark, Zacian, and essentially Scyther is a speedster inside the game in the split between Scyther and Scissor right here. So, Leafeon got nerfed, not a big deal. A+ tier, I think it's still incredibly good. I don't think the nerfs hurt it that much at all. It's still really, really powerful, so doing great. Absol, I'm going to move it up for sure. It might be A- or B. I think B might be fair, but you know, these are some really nice buffs for this Pokemon. However, I don't think it's made it a broken Pokemon. I think what it's done is brought it in line and made it reasonable. Another Pokemon that kind of hangs out right there is Talonflame. Not the best thing in the game, but pretty dang good. Gengar, I think, also sort of hangs out in this area after the buffs. These Pokemon are not bad and can carry, but I do think they're outclassed by the rest of our speedsters. Leafeon, Dodrio, and Zoroark outclass them in a major way. I don't feel like any of the speedsters right now are completely busted. I still think at times Zoroark might be the best one, especially after Mewtwo Y received its nerfs, but in general, Leafeon, Dodrio, Zoroark, all really strong choices, really strong speedster Pokemon, but none of them are so good that you have to have them or you're losing. When I look at the S tier right here, these are Pokemon that's like, man, if you see them on the other side and they're any good, you're in so much trouble. It's just ridiculous. A+ tier, you know, kind of the same way to be fair. Zoroark and Zeraora are two good Pokemon. And Zeraora, I actually think is probably closer to A-, maybe even closer to A than some of these others inside the game. I think Zeraora, after its buffs that it got a while back, still outclasses most of the speedsters, and it might even be nudging up to the A tier, especially after the Mewtwo nerfs. I don't know if you remember, but there was a brief period before Mewtwo X released that I think Zeraora was probably A. We may be right back there. I'm going to put it A- for the time being, and we'll kind of have to see how the meta shakes out. But I could see Zeraora climbing the charts here because the buffs it got were really, really nice. And this was when they changed its leveling and all that. And then we have Scyther, which I think is C. I think Scyther's just in a really weird position. Maybe it's B. I honestly think it's kind of, I think Scyther and Scissor, as we're moving into all-rounders, are kind of forgotten Pokemon. It's weird because they've received some buffs, and they released horrible, got buffs, then got nerfed, and ever since they got nerfed, I feel like they really just haven't fit inside the game. They're not terrible, so you could see them in the B tier, but everything in the C tier, I would love for the game to, you know, take another look at right now, for sure. And let's start moving our Pokemon up for our D tier right here. We're gonna move up for our D tier. For our all-rounders, who I don't think really any of them are gonna sit into our D tier. We're gonna have to see. We're gonna move our all-rounders onto our tier list. Let's go, Buzzwole, Garchomp, Azumarill. Hey, everybody. Okay, welcome. Welcome to the tier list, you silly gooses. Let's start with, we'll do Mimikyu last, because Mimikyu is our newest release. Let's start talking about Urshifu. I think Urshifu, both versions of Urshifu are incredible. I do think the nerfs to Urshifu are actually pretty decent. So I would like to give it a second before I say Urshifu is like S. I actually felt like playing it. It's not bad at all, but I actually think the nerfs are reasonable. I think Dark Bear has not been S tier for a while. However, it's still been incredibly good. I'm going to put both Urshifus up in our A+ tier. They feel powerful, but not so powerful that you have to do something crazy about it. Lucario is probably in our A tier, either A or A-. I think Lucario gains a ton of value when the top end of the game gets nerfed a little bit. It may be closer to A-. We're just going to have to see. Tyranitar, A tier. I think people are sleeping on T-Tar. It's better than you think. Its buffs that it got a little while back were nice. Its lifesteal change really, really nice. I think Tyranitar is doing pretty dang well right now. You just have to make sure you're farming. Just farm at the beginning of the game. Learn your last hitting. Once you have that, once you hit 9, essentially you are really, really powerful. Zarina, pretty good. A- maybe? A- or B? I bet you're going to see more value out of Zarina with the top end of the game being buffed to nerfed too. Machamp, same kind of thing. It's either A or A minus. It's always pretty good, and it really hasn't changed too much. Charizard, super underrated Pokemon, but I do think you could still help this Pokemon out. The curse changes were really nice for this. Curse Bangle feels like the perfect item for Char. Not bad. All the all-rounders are really powerful. I think A minus is fair. I've been going back and forth on Sword, but at this point I do think Sword is kind of hanging out up in the A range as well. A really solid Pokemon inside the game. Dragonite's a weird one. Dragonite's good and then fine and then not as good. I don't know. Dragonite's just kind of weird. I think A minus is fair. Outrage is good. Hyper Beam is still pretty good, and again, when the top things get nerfed, the things that are kind of like sitting there in the middle become a lot more viable, and Dragonite is one of those Pokemon. Blaziken, I mean, it might be S. Blaziken, guys, it was already doing well. Then the crazy things get nerfed, they drop down, and Blaziken gets buffed. I hesitate to put it S right now because it does lack essentially a Unite move, and that, you know, is one of the factors that I think is hurting this Pokemon a little bit from being S tier. However, I think this thing is just so crazy strong. We're definitely entering a bit of a Blaziken meta. I think A plus is fair, and we're gonna have to see if it gets even better than that. Zacian's S. Zacian is S. It is so good. It might be the best Pokemon in the game right now. It's definitely in contention. You know, it was nerfed multiple times, and now it's sitting in a place that you would say is extremely powerful, but still doable, still reasonable. Well, reasonable, I don't know. It's extremely powerful, but it's not released Zacian. Maybe that's the most fair way to look at that. Buzzwole, I'd say Buzzwole's A+. Buzzwole's one of those Pokemon that if you're good with Buzzy Boy, you are extremely impactful. It's a little tough for people to be that good with Buzzwole sometimes, but Buzzwole's amazing. It's so good, and it's been so good for a long time. Azumarill is probably A-, especially with some of the nerfs to the high end. It's a Pokemon that I would love to see just a little bit of a love for, so you could put it down into our B tier right here, but it actually performs really well in lane. And that's, you know, a really important part of the game is how well you can dominate early inside of the game, and Azumarill does very, very well early, evolving at 4, getting a really powerful move. It's just a super strong choice. Garchomp, doing great. Been doing great for a while now, which is cool because for a long time it was not. I think Garchomp's awesome. I think A tier is a very fair place to put this Pokemon. If it had more sort of crowd control elements, I could see it even higher, but it already does pretty well with its Dragon combo. So I think it's doing great. And then we have Mimikyu, and I think Mimikyu is better than people think. I'm gonna put Mimikyu up into our A+ tier, I think. I think I can hear the argument for A. It's definitely not broken, which is nice. I love a release that's not broken. It's really good, but it's squishy enough to be countered. Its Unite move isn't broken, but it is good. It's like a KO combo machine. I like Mimikyu a lot, and I'm very happy with its release, and I think A+ tier, maybe even A tier, is where it should go. I'm a little partial because I like the release so much, and I'm having so much fun with it and doing so well with it, so it might just be the perfect release for me. As far as the Decidueye Memorial tier previously, and now the Dammit Memorial tier, I don't know what Pokemon you would really say is doing super poorly in the game and they absolutely have to fix, but if you needed to, we could talk about a lot of the Pokemon in our C tier right here, just needing some love to get a little bit better inside the game. I think when you nerf the highest end of the game, it makes everything sort of shift up a bit, and it makes the game feel a lot more balanced. And now it's time to talk about our God tier Pokemon. I've been going back and forth about this, and I really don't have an answer, and I mean, I feel like I'm being incredibly Norse right now, but I just have to be honest about where I see the meta. I can't decide between 3 Pokemon. I can't decide between Mewtwo, Inteleon, and Zacian. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to do with these Pokemon right now as far as the tier list goes. Time will tell. We have to see exactly how this is going to shake out. But I think these three are kind of the most busted inside the game. And I do think after the changes to Mewtwo Y, Mewtwo X is kind of back. And that makes Mewtwo X Comfey come back. And I think that might be the best, but honestly, it could be Zacian. I would love to hear from you in the comments. What do you think the best Pokemon in the game is right now? Obviously, this is a huge patch. It's all new, but I think this is a good look at how the meta has shifted inside the game. As always, I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And now we have a little fun.
It's alright to tell me what you think about Inteleon.
All right, the biggest thing that you have to recognize is that Flail Snorlax is top tier right now, and one of the only counters for that, of course, Chandelure. Chandelure can counter it because Chandelure can lower the amount of healing Snorlax can get from its Unite move. It can lower the amount of healing it can get from its Flail. However, these Pokemon are clearly God tier Pokemon right now. After you see Pokemon like Mewtwo sort of hanging out in the middle right here, and then other Pokemon being very, very confusing. Absol, I don't know if it's the best Pokemon in the game or something's bugged with it, so I have to put it in the what's my tier again here. And then of course Cram, Scissor sitting down in that D tier. I don't know if they're ever going to escape it. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening. I love you guys so much, and I will see you all next time. Nerf Blink 182.